Hello, Lisa here. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to this week's episode of Tarot by the Book. If you are new to this series, Tarot by the Book is sort of a 3-in-1 kind of video. I do them every week, and what I do is randomly select a tarot deck from my collection, and with that deck, I sort of share some of my thoughts on the deck. I was just going to smudge the book. That's funny. I don't usually do that. I'm going to share with you my thoughts on the deck, give you a 3-card week ahead tarot reading, and then we're going to look together at the guidebook and review each card from that week ahead reading according to the book guidebook's definitions and perspectives, as well as my intuitive ones. So this is a really great video because it gets you a chance to see the deck working in action. So it's kind of like a review. But it's also an opportunity to see how the deck reads intuitively, and then a chance to get a little bit more insight into the guidebook or the author's perspective or the deck creator's perspective. And it's just a neat way to see all aspects of the deck. So I will be, when we dive into the cards, doing a 3-card week ahead reading. And I also like to have timestamps below in the description box of this video. This week, I randomly selected Maggie Stiefvater's Illuminating the Prophecy. This is actually the Raven's Prophecy Tarot. And me and this deck have a complicated history. So when I got this deck around Halloween time, I think it was 2018. It must have been 2018. And it was kind of an impulse buy. But I picked up this deck and I worked with it a little bit, and I ended up putting it in my to be traded pile. And then late last year, around November, December time, I think it was, I started reading Maggie Stiefvater's Raven Cycle series, which is a young adult. I think it's a set of 4 books. It might even say in the intro here. But I got really drawn into the world, and I'd actually decided to read those books because before I traded away my Raven's Prophecy Tarot, I wanted to see if reading the books would change the way I felt about the deck. I absolutely loved the books. I loved them so much. And I actually haven't worked with the deck since I finished the books, so this will be my first time diving back into it. I'm really kind of excited, not gonna lie. But first I want to tell you a little bit about the deck. I did trim mine, so it originally had orange borders that went all the way around the deck, but I trimmed them off of the tops and the sides of the deck. And then I edged the entire thing in orange. And my only sort of regret about that trim is that it left this little bit of orange border around the backs and on the bottom as well. And I'm not really sure how I feel about that. But I can live with it, I think. I did remember from working with this deck initially that the cards were very sort of minimalist and they were very fiery. And yeah, I'm not sure if what I'm gonna think about actually working with this deck. Oh, here's where you can see I kind of chopped off some of the word and number there. I can't really remember what my experiences were like before, but again, there's a couple of decks in my collection that I ended up not connecting with very well at first because they were minimalist or because they were almost more pippish, and my comfort level with numerology, my comfort level with pips is different, so maybe I'll have an easier time. Maybe the fact that I've read the books and have that sort of in the back of my head will change how I view these cards. I actually have no idea. If or how it'll change my view. Sorry, I'm just kind of getting drawn into the images a little bit. I'm like, is this from the story? So let's just see what happens. So if you are here for the reading, then you're going to want to take a couple deep breaths, get really settled into your seat, concentrate on what you want to hear as far as, do you want to hear messages for your week ahead, or do you want the 3-card reading instead? I'm just going to make a little note of that, the Hierophant. Or do you just want a reading about a particular situation in your life? Either way, I'm going to be using 3-card positions, as I always do for Tarot by the Book. I use 1 card. The first card position is energy. The second card is obstacle, so we view that card in shadow. And the third position is advice. So energy, obstacle, and advice are the 3 spread positions that I use for week ahead reading. And this is also the spread I do for myself when I'm doing my own personal week ahead spreads. And it's also a really wonderful rune spread, energy, obstacle, advice. So with that said, I'm going to give this a couple more shuffles. We're going to cut and dive into our by the book reading. Oh. All right, I'm gonna cut and we're gonna get started. Right there. Our energy is the moon. Our obstacle is the 6 of coins. And our advice is the sun. Oh, that's really interesting. To have energy and advice be the 2 primary celestial bodies is really, really interesting to me. They are really beautiful, these cards. All right, let's dive into our energy for the week. We have the moon. I absolutely love this image. This is also the image, I guess it's not the image from the cover of the book. It may be the image from the cover of the box, which I don't have. I have it stored right now. But we see this sort of raven or this crow leaning back and seeming to hold the moon in her beak. And I think that's a really interesting image because, of course, we understand that this is an optical illusion. We understand the raven or the crow isn't actually holding the moon. And yet that's exactly what it looks like. And I think that this card for the energy of our week tells me that we're going to have perhaps a tendency this week to jump to conclusions. We're going to have a tendency this week to be faced with things that maybe look different than they really are. I think it's going to be really important when we have moon energy coming up as our primary energy of the week. It tells me that our fears may have a tendency to creep in. Our anxieties may tend to shape the way that we're viewing situations in our life. And I also think the moon is a good reminder that we all have a unique perspective, and that perspective shapes the way that we interact with the world. It shapes the way that we view interactions, we view other people, and we view situations. And I think that that's a good reminder to know that your own personal experiences have shaped this personal perspective that you carry around with you. And so the moon is a reminder that that perspective is something to be acutely aware of as you move through the week. There is a tendency for the kind of thinking where you get sort of carried away. I call it, in my own head, I call it spiraling, where you start with like a kind of a simple thought, but then the more you think about it, kind of the bigger or the worse or the more involved it gets until it's become a lot muddier than it really needs to be. So the moon tells me that we're going to have kind of a confusing week. Perhaps we're going to get some mixed messages. Our perceptions are going to get in the way. Our own personal opinions may get in the way. Things aren't going to be necessarily as they seem. And in my experience, when we have this kind of energy, it's important to move slowly, to not feel like we want to, to not jump to conclusions, to not jump to react, to take our time. And really sit with things before deciding what they mean or what's happening. I think that's going to be really important for us this week. Let's take a look at the obstacle, and we have the 6 of coins, and here we have 2 hands holding this bundle of yellow roses. It's as if you're being offered this gift of roses, right? And we're looking, don't forget, this is going to be essentially as if this card were reversed. I don't read reversals, but I do read based on the position, and this was an obstacle position. The 6 of coins is a card in general about rebalancing or reharmonizing after difficulty. In the 5s, we often see conflict and strife and that sort of thing. And when we're looking at the coins specifically, we often have a feeling of financial loss or material or financial worry or anxiety. And so typically the 6 of coins in a positive or upright position would tell us that things are rebalancing, they're reharmonizing. But instead, when we're looking at this as a shadow, we may be a little bit out of whack that way. We may still be feeling a little bit like we can't settle into a new harmony or a rebalancing of our situation. And when it comes to our material things, we may be feeling like we need to really hold on tight to what we have. And we also may be feeling a little bit of lack. A little bit of like things are out of balance. We're either spending too much or putting too much of ourselves out there and not getting enough back, or we're getting too much and we're not putting enough out there, but it doesn't quite feel settled. It doesn't quite feel comfortable. It doesn't quite feel balanced. So materially, things are going to feel a little bit unsettled and a little bit out of balance this week. But I think it's important to remember that these sorts of states of being, of that sort of out of balance, of maybe being in a position of need when you're used to being in a position to provide, these things are often temporary. They are often temporary, and they don't feel temporary when we're dealing with them. They can feel really overwhelming. They can feel really life-altering. And I think it's important to keep perspective and remember that we will get back to a place of harmony. We will get back to a place of balance. It's often just about sitting with the energy long enough and sitting with the lesson long enough that you have that opportunity to then move forward and move back into a place of balance or harmony. So these both, interestingly, feel a little bit like wait and see kind of cards, like don't jump to conclusions, wait and see. I do think it's interesting that the hand position in these two cards is identical. So I'm just going to bring it up. Both hands are cupped. Here we have roses, and we had this in shadow, so that feeling of lack. And then here the sun with the cupped hands is holding this idea of pureness, of light, of brightness. And this is our advice for the week. And the sun is very much about authenticity and unbridled joy. It's about letting the light in where it's been very dark. You have all this darkness around the hands. And interestingly, here we have hold of something tangible, and we're looking to something tangible to sort of fill our needs, fill our cup, make us feel whole, make us feel safe. And the sun is here to remind us that the thing that's going to make you feel whole and safe and as if you have everything you need is probably going to be intangible this week. So you need to look to sources of intangible comfort, intangible joy. So rather than turning to the material to feel better, instead, think about what fills you up that is non-material, that is free, that is readily available to you, whether that is the connections, the friendships in your life, the loved ones in your life, or whether that is your ability to seek the joy in every situation. Whatever it is, what you're looking for, the gift this week, the thing to focus on this week is that intangible. And I think that's really interesting, particularly because the moon was all about obscurity and things not being as they seem, and like don't react too quickly. And the Six of Coins is about feeling sort of a material lack of balance, lack of harmony. And yet here's this very joyful, beautiful card. The sun is a very positive aspected card, and it's telling us to focus on those intangible joys, those intangible good things that are around us right now. And I think that's really, really powerful advice. So that is my intuitive reading. Let's take a look now at the guidebook and see what the guidebook has to say about these three cards. So I just checked. This is one of the books that I've edged, and I've talked about this before, but I haven't done it to a lot of books lately. But this was a book I had a while back. And I'll take a marker and I'll just mark the edges of the pages for the majors in purple, cups in blue, pentacles in green, swords in yellow, and wands in red. So it just makes it easy to flip to what I need. So let's take a look at our moon card, which will be in our majors, and see what it has to say. All right. So the moon, fear, dreaming, and illusion. Imagine you're walking in a landscape lit only by moonlight. Dark shapes surround you, and without any light, you can't be sure if that object closest to you is a boulder or a bear. You're pretty sure, though, that it's a bear. You hurry down the path. Is there a path? There's not enough illumination for you to be certain there's even a path. So you're just hurrying on your way, whichever way that might be. You're not sure if you're headed toward peril or comfort, or even if you're only going around in circles. The only comfort you have, really, is that the night can only go on so long, and eventually day will arrive with the sun and the clarity that brings. Until then, you'll have to make do with the moonlight and the unfeeling stars. All of this is the moon card. Many people read the moon as a negative card, and it's true that it is not a comfortable place to be. But I've never minded seeing it in my readings. I've always read it as a card of dreamy possibility. Sure, the scary part of this card is that anything is possible, but the wonderful, crazy part of this card means that anything is possible. A lot of good ideas can come out of this liminal space of tilting unease. Just like a dream, which might turn out to be either terrifying or wonderful, the ultimate tone is often decided by how you choose to view the world around you. Walk through the moonlit landscape expecting to find more boulders than bears, and you'll be surprised at how often daylight proves you right. Oh, that was such a beautiful message. And I think it's especially poignant considering we do get the sun card as our advice card. And so these two cards work really beautifully together when we're thinking about the idea of kind of going with the fact that there's all this possibility and potential in the unknowns. And if we can get comfortable with the unknowns this week, then we can really mine the joys and the possibility and the clarity out of the sun card. So that's just what kind of came to mind after reading that. Let's take a look at the Six of Coins, and then we'll come back to the sun. So this was our obstacle card. So remember, we are looking at it more in shadow, and this doesn't have specific shadowed meaning. So we'll want to mine that distill that from the meaning. So the keywords are generosity, contentedness, and charity. I was sorely tempted to make this entry read simply, turn back to the entry for the 4 of coins and reverse everything it says. That's so funny because as I was reading this card intuitively, I was like, I kind of felt like I was almost talking about the shadow side of the 4 of coins, which is really interesting. Anyway, it's true nonetheless. The 4 of coins, the miser card, is about being defined by an unhealthy relationship with money, either because you're being a miser or because you feel you're constantly having to ask for money from someone else. The 6, on the other hand, is about feeling good about where you're at with your finances. You feel stable enough to be able to think of lending a helping hand, or stable enough to accept a helping hand without it destroying your self-esteem. In either case, finances are no longer controlling you. You feel like you're controlling them. It's worth noting that the coins are the suit of material goods and practical gain. So the gift on offer might not always be money. It might be hand-me-down furniture, donated time, or merely an act for someone else that represents a bit of sacrifice on your part. Sometimes the hardest thing to be generous with is our experience. So if there's someone in your life that might be heartened by hearing how you survived similar hardship, be mindful that your battle scars can be a gift as well. The art is quite simply a gift of roses. That makes sense. So tying this into my reading, it definitely echoes what I was saying about feeling like there's maybe some lack, feeling like maybe, because we're looking at what we just heard through the shadow. So we're looking at it not quite reversed, but definitely blocked or impeded or not in its best light. And so instead of being able to comfortably accept gifts or give gifts or accept help or give help, we're in a place of sort of discomfort with that, is how I would interpret the book. And I would say, okay, so there's a need to sort of cling and hold and perhaps control where energy, resources, material, money, that sort of thing is required. So I would layer that in with what I had to say intuitively, and just say that, yeah, things are going to feel a little unsettling this week. We're going to feel a little ungrounded materially. We're going to feel a little bit like there's too much unknown. There's perhaps a lack of resources, a lack of help, or we don't feel like we're able to give enough or do enough ourselves. So keep in mind that that's going to be clouded because we're in a cloudy place this week with the moon card. And let's go back now to the sun. This is our advice card for the week. Solutions, clear-sightedness, hope, and self-awareness. After the murky uncertainty of the moon and the searing trauma of the death, devil, and tower cards, finally the sun has come out. With the sun comes light and vitality and, above all, awareness. You can finally see the truth with unbiased eyes. In the clear daylight, the world reveals itself to you. And finally, after the arduous journey to get here, you feel equal to the task of living in it. The sun is in many ways the opposite of the moon, with all of the latter's veiled perils, but the sun wouldn't feel like such a victory if you weren't so infinitely familiar with how it felt to stumble in the dark. Oh, that's such a powerful message considering we got both cards. The longer you've been wandering in uncertainty, the more you can appreciate this sudden, glorious surety. When the sun appears in your reading, don't doubt the hint of confidence you feel toying at the edge of your consciousness. It's not a fleeting mood. It's not unfounded. It's the beginning of a time of power and wisdom, of control and happiness. Hope and possibility have matured into joy and reality. So snatch the sun in your hand and use it to light your way. Oh, that's such a beautiful message. I wonder if I worked with the guidebook much when I worked with this deck before, because I don't remember the guidebook feeling so poignant, but I also have grown to really love Maggie Stiefvater's writing style, so that certainly helps. Wow, what an intense message. When we look at the fact that we're sort of, the energy of the week is uncertainty, but the advice is to sort of grab hold of the joy and grab hold of what is certain, I think that these cards work really beautifully together. And I think the 6 of coins just confirms where the unsettled feelings, where that sense of obscurity is, and it's going to be with regard to our material lives, right? But the sun is like, yeah, there's good stuff there. Like, you really need to focus on that, which I think is really cool. So I think that was super fun. It's definitely inspired me to play more with this deck. I hope that you enjoyed coming along with me on this journey. This deck is still currently available. It is a mass market deck, so I'll have a link for it down below if you want to take a look at it and check it out for yourself, especially to see the untrimmed version and see what it looks like. But I'm really quite pleased with the book. I'm quite pleased with the readings that we got today, and I think that the messages came through really well. I think that the intuitive stuff that came through layered really beautifully with what the book had to say, which is what I really get very excited for or about in this series. So I'm really interested to hear your feedback down below, whether you want to share your feedback as to what may or may not have resonated right away, or if you want to circle back to this video next week after you've sat with these energies for a week and want to give some feedback on how it all played out for you. I think that'd be really cool. As always, if you'd like to book a reading with me, you can do that over at supportivetarot.com. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!